life is complex.
So is our mental health. It cannot be understood by diagnosis alone.
Our philosophy is treat the person, not the mental illness.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Humanizing Mental Health. I'm Trent and I.
And I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
Yeah. Today, well, I don't know, Jeremy, about you, but I mean, one of the things that seems to be entering into the public zeitgeist quite a bit is the idea of trauma. You hear that quite a bit, like not just from your clients, but just people like either through YouTube or just in casual conversation.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, as you say that, I'm in a book series by Brandon Sanderson called The Stormlight Archives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting because there's a quote from that book just this morning that entirely relates to what you're talking about. One of the main characters is asked to do something significant, and he says that I'm broken, and one of the main characters says life breaks us, and then we fill in the cracks with something stronger.
Interesting. Yeah. So I think that kind of brings us to sort of the title of the episode, whereas, trauma is what happens to us. It's not really an illness. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. In the recent trauma-informed care that we did with the Canadian Armed Forces, one of the things they were really getting us to do or fundamentally change in our attitude is to think not what is wrong with you, but rather what happened to you.
Yeah. I think that kind of goes back to, I don't know if I read this somewhere or if you told me, because I don't know, like you're such a fount of knowledge for me. But I was thinking about that idea that I've been using with a lot of people that I've talked with lately. Whereas, in an insane world, and like an insane response is sane in the sense,
Yeah,
in the sense that, just getting back to trauma, how a lot of people find this quite interesting, but really a trauma response is just your body's natural response to fear and disruption and dysregulation. So if you've been in a state of dysregulation for a long time, your body is going to look at that as normal and calibrate for those types of responses.
yeah. Like if we can make an example here that kind of translates over to physical health. One of the things I often talk about to people is, say you broke your arm and you go to the emergency room.
Mm-hmm.
Can the doctor heal your bone?
Well, on Star Trek, maybe, we're, but I mean, even there too, even with a dermal regenerator, like what it really is that all it's doing is creating an environment to speed up the body's natural healing processes. That's where, even as we've talked about several times on the show, where we as therapists, we're not healers. We create the healing environment, and then the body comes back into natural homeostasis. Same idea.
Yeah, exactly. Like no doctor can heal your bone. They set your bone. And I think lots of times people can really resonate with that because they can hear that. They know it. They know that concept of having your bone set. And it's the same thing in therapy when it comes to recovery or trauma. It's an injury. It's not an illness. And so then when what we do, just like you said, is set the environment for that person to be able to heal.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why, as we've talked about before, that's why when you go in to see a therapist and you're doing that intake, and they'll talk to you about things. How's everything going with your family? How's your financial state? What is your nutrition like? because all of that provides the basis for healing itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think one of the reasons that this particular topic came up is because we were in a case consultation and referring to someone with a trauma-related injury that had been to a few therapists, and each time all they did was talk about what happened. Um, and while the important question about uh, finding out or understanding what happened to you, the what happened is only part of it. It'll um, how did those events shift something inside of us? So if I could compare two things. So one, you have a broken bone. A broken bone comes from an acute impact or whatever it is that created that. And there's that kind of trauma injury. You also have something in trauma injuries that would be much more comparable to like a repetitive motion injury. And that is, you have these small things, or what they call small T trauma, over a very long period of time that stack and stack and stack and stack, and they create an injury that is from the cumulative effect over time.
Yeah. And I think, like when you look at that, I think that we could compare that to like if somebody has a trauma, like let's say a car accident, and then their body is dysregulated, their nervous system is dysregulated, so their nervous system is trying to think that there's trauma out there, so they're pulling away from family and friends. Family and friends are seeing that, so that they're reacting in a certain way, which is then becoming more cumulative to that. Maybe they're not going out to the grocery store. Maybe they're not going out to the movies or doing things socially. So that then just deepens that more and more and takes that threat response and just either turns it up or just keeps it there, because as we've talked about before, other nervous systems can help us to regulate. But if you don't have those other things outside of ourselves to help act as that barometer, then it's going to just keep staying there. The pot is going to keep boiling.
Totally. If you could use an example, and let's say in terms of, okay, so backing up a little bit, I said that these therapists did nothing but talk about what happened. Well, if we are to understand what it means to be trauma informed, it means that we understand that the trauma is not just what happened to you, it's about what changed inside you. And we need to know, is somebody in a place in which they can regulate sufficiently that they can process what has happened. So this fundamentally, and I developed this concept from a bunch of reading and other knowledge that I refer to as a trauma triangle. It's much easier to be able to draw it out. But if you think about trauma, and you think in the diagnostic manual, trauma used to be considered an anxiety disorder. It was considered an anxiety disorder because of all of the physical arousal symptoms: the racing heart, the queasy stomach, the racing mind, impending sense of doom or panic attacks, difficulty falling or staying asleep, hypervigilance, all of those key things. But we also know that trauma is dissociative. And so if you understand the dissociative aspects of trauma as well, which we're really talking about dissociative memory, where whatever events or things that happened were so intense that it's like you've dropped a sheet of glass and it's shattered. The thoughts, the feelings, the physical sensations and emotions are all shattered, and they're not well connected. That type of memory cannot be put away into long-term memory. And recently there's neurological studies that demonstrate that to be true. What that means is, because those memories are dissociative and they can't be stored, they're raw. It's like whenever you open your computer and whatever's on your desktop is just simply there. You can't ever put it into another file. So what that means is, because they're so raw and they're always right there, then they're vulnerable to triggers. This is where people, a lot of times, they say, I've been triggered. What they don't understand is because of the dissociative memory, something that is similar has connected in the moment, and now their feelings are actually not about now. They're about a accumulation of the past and the present. And they're felt in really big ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I love what you said there. And like, I think, like where you talk about the shards of glass, and I think when people go back to those traumatic memories, it's like they're trying to pick up all of those shards of glass all at once. Whereas, like if we're going from a trauma-informed perspective, just to roll it back here, we need to make sure that you're regulated, that your nervous system is stable, and that you have the skills and the environment to do that, not just within the counseling environment, but within your larger system. And then once we've done that, then what we can do is we can and to be trauma informed, it's not about telling your story so much, because sometimes if you verbalize your story, and I think that a lot of people, at least that I've run into, I don't know about you, Jared, like when you've had clients come in, like where they'll say, well, don't you want to hear about my trauma? And the thing
Right.
is that in a lot of times, I don't need to know what's happened. What we need to do is, because if you verbalize it, if you go back there, you're going to activate that and you're going to
Yeah.
pick up all of those
Right.
shards. So what
Yeah.
we need to do is just think about it. And what we almost want to do, especially like in certain things with like EMDR, or like with what I'll do with like the 4 blinks. And I don't want to go into that too deeply because, we don't want to have a 2-hour podcast. Where we take that and it's about slicing it thinner. So where you take those shards of glass and it's like at one at a time, you're going to process that in just tiny little sips and put that back in. And then eventually, once that all gets reassembled, then that can then slowly transfer into long-term memory and then be worn away. Like when I say that, I'm not meaning that memory's going to go away, but if you think about regular memories, the more that we access them and the more that they build up, they shift and change over time. So they get smoothed out like a rock.
Yeah, totally. In fact, if I could link that back into the trauma triangle, on the one point of the trauma triangle is the arousal symptoms or the symptoms of anxiety. On the right point. On the left point is the symptoms of dissociation. And in the middle of the triangle are triggers. That is because the dissociative memories are vulnerable to triggers. The triggers actually link to the arousal symptoms. And at the bottom of the triangle is avoidance. So then that is what links the triangle into being stable. Triangle is one of the most stable shapes in the world. It's very strong. It won't change. So as long as we keep avoiding, we will keep the triangle stuck. The problem is so many therapists or even people recognize I need to stop avoiding, but they immediately go into talking about what happened. And instead, like you said, we need to create stabilization. We need to diminish potency of those arousal symptoms through body responses, integrated emotion, physical states. And so one of the things that I do is when I know someone is coming in with the context of trauma, then I'll often, most of the time, or my process usually is to use a measurement, the PCL5. Usually you can get it on an app on their phone. We go over it together and take an original or a first measurement and see where they fall on the severity graph. The severity of how their symptoms you're experiencing predicts when it is that we're going to start talking about what happened. And so we'll have them routinely use that over time. And as you find that their intensity of symptoms are beginning to diminish, that's when we double down and can begin to process the events and understanding meaning that was made out of them.
Yeah. And Jeremy, like I think the thing is that like the PCL5 and a lot of things that we're going to talk about today can actually be found in a free app, like the PTSD coach. Yeah. So and I think we're going to link that down in the show notes. And for people that are interested, you can definitely go through, check that out for yourself. And I would say, like, if you feel like you're dealing with issues of PTSD like that, that would be a good place for a little bit of psychoeducation, but to maybe bring that into your therapist or to find a trauma-informed therapist to then work on that with you.
Yeah, absolutely, totally. It entirely makes sense to me. The application does have down regulation skills as well.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind that at the beginning of this podcast, we said that there needs to be an environment or a setting that is created,
Mm-hmm.
and the app is only part of that. The app, just by simply using skills alone, will be insufficient for someone to come to healing. They also need a therapeutic relationship in which they have somebody that there is fundamental trust and an environment that is has that person-centered position, that non-judgmental, that has what's the word I'm looking for? Positive regard.
Yeah, yeah. Like you're just you're linking it back into Rogerian common factors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In which there's an unconditional positive regard. That's what I was looking for. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like I think if people are one thing that I think that we should bring up too, excuse me, because we may be speaking to people that are having issues right now with PTSD, but it's also about family members, because sometimes what will happen is that you will see a family member having dysregulation and not knowing what's going on. And,
For sure.
for a lot of that, like what I found, I don't know about you, but I've recommended to a lot of people the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, which is an excellent book to go through and to help you, like if you are a family member that of an individual that may be having issues with PTSD, that'll give some really good reference points.
Yeah, and remember, in the diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress, it's not just about the individual that the events happen to. So if I could use kind of a general example. So individual gets into a motor vehicle accident, and they could have died for sure. It's just they didn't die. And within their process in that accident, they were able to get themselves out of the car. So within that, for them, they had a feeling of capacity and competence. They felt like they could act and have influence over the outcome. That's pretty significant. That individual, because of that internal experience, could likely, even though the events were like deadly, could have been deadly, that person may not end up traumatized. They may not end up with any lasting effects after. Now, you go to a family member that gets the call that their family member has been in an accident. They see the pictures of how bad the vehicle was damaged. Now, that individual actually might end up with post-traumatic stress, and they may end up with an exaggerated isn't the right word, with an intense response, to the point at which can maybe even cause a problem between the two individuals. That the person that is traumatized is very concerned. I don't want you to drive now. I don't think you're ready to drive.
Mm-hmm.
The person that was in the incident itself is like entirely able to climb behind a wheel again without feeling those intense anxiety symptoms.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the fact with your role with the Canadian military, the fact that you don't solely treat the military members, but you're also available to the families too as well. Am I not correct there?
Actually, no. There is a social worker that is available to the family members. I do have a role with family members that is only insofar as I do a screening. So I do a screening upon the individual's return, the military member's return. The family's involved with that so
Right.
that they can give feedback. But it's also about how did that transition go back into the family? So let's say that there was a significant critical incident that happened. Perhaps maybe from what you're describing, the military member is okay, but the
Okay.
family member felt a massive amount of distress and they don't feel regulated. In that situation, there are resources. The resource just isn't me. I will be then referring them to the appropriate resources. In Suffield, there is someone that is a social worker that works with the marriage and family, military family resource center. And that's who I would connect them to. And there wouldn't be any fees for service.
Okay, fair enough. Sorry, you're just so darn good, man. I just think you should work with everybody.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. I was gonna say, you know, 'cause I was thinking about how, like, because I think a lot of times people like have a good. I may be wrong, but I think in the popular zeitgeist, we have a really good understanding of how trauma may represent in adults, but I don't think we really talk about how trauma could represent in children.
Yeah. Um, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, because I almost think about the fact that
Oh, hello. This is our mayor from Medicine Hat. Hi, Mayor Clark. How you doing?
So I'm sorry for the interruption and my inability to get on earlier. So I interrupted Trent there.
No, that's all good. In fact, if I could give some context, and what I'd like to do is I'd like for you to join in this conversation. We'll transition a little bit. Um, so for our audience today, we had planned on meeting with Mayor Linnsie Clark, who we wanted to talk with because you came in just at the point after COVID, and there was like a communal experience with a traumatic event. We'll link that in. Because of your difficulty logging in, Trent and I started a conversation that was about um, that trauma is an injury, not an illness. But we're just talking about processes of recovery, and I'm happy to link you into this conversation. And then also maybe if there's a possibility in the future that we might be able to connect and have a broader conversation. You good with that?
Yeah, that sounds good. I sent you an email when I was struggling. Let's definitely chat again.
Yeah, for sure. So curious if you're open to that, and I'll set the stage a little bit. In Medicine Hat, as of course, Mayor Clark, you're well aware, during COVID, we had an additional mental health crisis within our city in which there's a group of people that were all connected, is a contagious suicide where multiple people died. And so there was a really significant from the ground up response to that. And you came in, I believe, around the time in which the COVID restrictions were ending, and you would have been at the platform of recovery at a community level. And I'm really curious about your experience and kind of your thoughts about what community recovery has looked like.
So I came in October, or I guess beginning of November 2021. And
Okay.
so the some of the restrictions were lifted. I think most. There were a few restrictions on having large events still, I think. But notwithstanding the fact that the restrictions technically had been lifted, I would say it was about year 3 of my term, like last year, when people really started coming together again. I mean, there certainly were events, but there still was like a little bit of reluctance to, actually go for an in-person meeting or hold an event. But as you guys would know, in Medicine Hat this summer, we had events every weekend, and last year the same. So it even just to like behave as though the restrictions were lifted took some time, I think.
I'm curious. I remember one of the big things that jumped out at me. So we're located right on First Street, and then just really right across the street from us, by the library and down, the street was shut down, and there was a big street concert. And I remember the band 5440 playing. I was very curious about knowing, because fundamentally that seemed like an amazing event to start to get people together and moving. I'm curious about what it looks like from your position to be purposeful in planning for the mental wellness of your community.
Well, that was, I think it was called Together Again, and that was some federal funding that they had, I guess, the foresight to predict that people would need some kind of Kickstarter or permission to party again or come together and have fun together again. I think, the city did a great job with that festival. There was a dinner on the bridge, the Finley Bridge, which is this historic bridge in Medicine Hat, for those of you who aren't from Medicine Hat. And I think that was kind of the beginning of the turnover. But, there are still lasting impacts, and it's difficult to tell. I mean, you always want to be careful about correlation versus causation. But, whether it's, because of COVID or because everyone was at home more, spending more time on their screens, whether it's, Facebook or social media or, even just watching a lot of TV, that's a different, like people just had so much opportunity to do that during COVID. So I don't know what exactly is the causality, but certainly we're seeing, an uptick in mental health issues within all groups, but particularly children, I think, are kind of the scary number.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit as well. Interestingly enough, one of the things that I saw a fair bit of after COVID was a number of youth that had never struggled with anxiety before, but then after COVID had like what would look like a full diagnostic anxiety disorder, a social anxiety being of the most significant. And certainly it's hard when you see that kind of correlation to say that it's not causal. Also very fascinating as you talk about that, because when children are first born, the very first thing that comes online is facial recognition. So all those babies that were born during COVID, in which we needed to wear a mask to protect each other, would have had a very different attunement process because they couldn't have read faces as easily. And those are, I'm not saying that it was wrong to wear masks, by the way, just talking about the facts of the process. That it'll be curious to see those kids now, as they move into kindergarten and so forth, how that may affect their process.
Do you think that, partly though, children would have had, like, not infants that you're talking about during the, those very, very important attachment days, but that because children were home with their parents at an age where they're starting to explore and be independent, and they have, they go to school and they kind of live their own life at school, that they, that part of that is just they don't have as much confidence, and that leads to anxiety, or you just think it's
That's a really good question. In fact, you bring up a really good point that is in the popular idea of how children develop that's actually problematic. That is, Children are supposed to be mostly, the strongest attachment is supposed to be to their parents. There's good data out there that actually shows that children that stay at home and don't go to preschool actually do better through their teen years. They have less behaviors, they have less resistance or opposition to their parents. Actually, the idea that children need to associate with other children to learn is problematic, because you learn from your closest attachment relationships. I think that you're hitting on something important. The important part, though, from what you're describing, is everybody is at home and nobody has a sense of community. Everybody's at home and the adults don't know what's going on. And the children, their nervous system wires from the adults that are in their life. And so the adults don't know what's going on. They're under pressure. They don't know if they're going to continue to have work. They don't know if they're going to continue to have income. They don't know how that's going to affect their life. And they're in distress. Perhaps many of them are using avoidance strategies or ways to try to cope with that. But when you got those core people in your life that are so distressed, and as a child, it's very hard for you to feel secure.
So from a city perspective, or I guess a member of council perspective, one of the things that I think we've done really well this term, and are really focusing on, is that the connections, like you brought up, those community, which is connection, and is to really go a little deeper and build better relationships with the organizations in our community that do good work. And that has been really helpful because each organization will see like a different symptom of the mental health crisis. Like it's not like, for example, there may be a food insecurity issue, and that would be the food bank. There may be a housing insecurity issue, and that would be Medicine Hat Community Housing, or in some cases McMahon. There's all of these, and domestic violence, women's shelters. So making sure that those connections are really strong, and we have a web of a net, if you will, a net there. That's been a really important step that I think this community has historically done very well, but it's even more important now than ever because none of us can do it on our own.
Yes,
absolutely. I love it.
Recovery happens together. It's been far too long that we've been talking about individual recovery, whether that is addiction, whether it's mental health. We've been talking about that far too long. Certainly at an individual level, we can work with people. But this is one of the number one reasons why we even started this podcast, so people could understand that it's not the illness that we need to focus on. We need to focus on the individual and their growth that can happen. That happens through community.
Absolutely.
Speaking of which, I'd like to harken back to something. So of course, we did a little bit of reading before we met with you, and I'll tell you something that will probably make you smile. So I used to go 2 days a week to Oyen.
No way.
Yeah.
Like more recently, or?
Well, it's been a few years, but I spent about 3 years where I was traveling to Oyen. So for our listenership, our mayor is originally from Oyen. Oyen is almost 2 hours to the north of us, and is a kind of a hub. It's not a really big community, but there's a bunch of rural other communities around. It's a hub to all of those smaller communities. So did you grow up right in Oyen?
No, I grew up until for about 10 years. I think it was 8 years. So I was there before we moved back to Medicine Hat, on a farm. I would say half an hour, 40 minutes outside of Oyen, between Oyen and Bindloss. And so that was a very different way of growing up than a lot of people have. I have 4 siblings, and it was there was a lot of freedom associated with it, but we weren't, to your point, Jeremy, we didn't interact with a lot of other kids until we got a little older, but we had a built-in community with that many kids. So and just being able to go explore, and the more and more I think about it, and just where I am in my life now, that quiet and closeness to nature, we rarely get that in, like it's never quiet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's very interesting because you touch on something that was from a very foundational when we started. There's really three parts of our wellness: our relationship to ourself, our relationship to a community, or what we call our tribe, and our relationship to the earth.
Yeah, and all of those have to be in balance. I think um the hardest part probably right now is relationship with self. But because in order to, I think you need like peace and quiet and reflection. And unless you're making a concerted effort to meditate or pray on a regular basis, there's no like natural opportunities as much as there would be if you're, living in the country. You have to walk from here to there. It's quiet contemplation,
Yeah. I'm curious, Mary Clark, because of your upbringing, I wonder how that's really impacting and shaping your role and how you really shape public policy for Medicine Hat.
Well, one thing, I grew up in a Christian home, and I have always felt that's a sort of foundational piece of my upbringing. And with as many siblings as I had, I would say that being fussed over every little thing, or even noticing like, oh, there's a little bit of noise over there, like I have like a filter or something, because it just doesn't bother me as much as it sometimes seems to bother other people, like that tolerance for things not being exactly just right the way you want them. And also, I my parents are just wonderful people, and my dad and I would often once I got a little bit older, often get into debates. I would try and debate my mom, but she views it as a fight. So she's just like, no, not me. And so through that, learning that it's okay to have conversations that challenge what you think and try and challenge what the other person thinks, still results in, love at the end. We never let it impact our relationship or anything like that. And I I think that has been a real important, piece of my, I don't know, puzzle. And I do think that, unconditional love, I don't, I guess not everybody has it, but I feel like that is a cheat code in life almost. Like you're
Yeah,
to a really good start.
yeah. It's almost like you were listening to the
Yeah.
earlier part of our conversation, because we were talking about trauma recovery, and that it's about having a specific environment that is set, and part of that is unconditional regard, for sure. Yeah, and I could see how in within your role, not everyone's going to agree when you're meeting with council, and there's going to be potentially people get pretty heated because they feel strongly about the values that they bring towards what they're trying to accomplish, and to be able to have that center place where we can disagree and still have mutual respect.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys might have a different view of this than I do, and that's okay. Uh, my feeling is that people are also really being indulgent of their every emotion, because we have emotions, and like anger or outrage or like those types of feelings, but it doesn't mean that we're right. Like it's not like a truth teller, like, oh, you feel angry, therefore the world has wronged you. There needs to be a process of filtering your emotions through, you know, uh, experience. And, it just seems like a lot of people just kind of lean into outrage or lean into anger. And instead of, finding ways to maybe regulate those emotions, or determining that, your emotions are one data input to your overall decision making, and you don't have to just go with whatever your emotion is.
Yeah, like as I hear you talk, I almost think about like primary and secondary emotions, like where maybe that secondary emotion is that anger, but really what's below there, and can we really understand? Am I feeling maybe dysregulated? Am I feeling maybe that, maybe I'm sad, maybe I'm not feeling connected to those around me? Can I recognize where that's coming from? And also it's about how do we communicate, like going back to those very basic I feel statements, or conflict resolution, or even setting boundaries. Because I think that's something that everybody struggles with, or a lot
and
of
I
people do.
you're referring to, and where I'd link that together is the boundary often isn't with somebody else. The boundary is with me. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm feeling this particular way. It's not right nor wrong. I just need to turn inward first and figure this out, where I'm at, and how I then connect back into what's going on around me.
Yeah, go and do that U-turn.
And it's also where you tune your attention. Like, there is enough happening that if you wanted to be outraged constantly, you could be. Like, you can just continually
Oh, yeah.
find things that like upset you. And
Yeah,
like,
totally.
if the news makes you upset, you find more places to watch the news. So, tuning your attention, asking the question of like, does it feel good to be outraged? It seems like a waste of energy in a lot of cases. And it feels, I don't think it like adds to the joy of your life. So is that something I want to actually engage in this much? Or should
Yeah.
or is there some things I just like, I can't change it, so I'm not going to invest emotion into that thing?
Yeah. Yeah, you're sounding like Dr. David Burns right now. Like, the technique that you're talking about, it's called a cost-benefit analysis. And you take a look at that emotion. You go, what is this doing for me? What are the costs? For me, it comes back to boundaries again. I think that we've been pushed and pushed and pushed to be part of a global tribe, but we were never meant to function that way. We were meant to function in smaller groups. And so for me, I tried to shrink my world to the areas that are important, that have influence, connect with the tribe, and have them be where you spend your energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that it's important to point out there, it's not that you're saying that you're not cutting yourself off from the larger world. You're just saying to yourself, okay, where, like, you're still going to look at the news from time to time, the global news, but you're not always going to just focus solely on that. Is that right, Jerem?
So far out of your control. Things that are so far out of your control, for sure. So I'm cognizant of time a little bit. Trent and I are going to need to transition into appointments, but I want to share a story, and it kind of fits with what you're talking about connection to the earth. And I think, Mayor Clark, you'll probably appreciate this because you've probably driven the 41 highway like a bazillion times. So for our listenership, the 41, there's this one section that is absolutely gorgeous as it goes along the South Saskatchewan River, and there's a big coulees and stuff all over the place. Once you get beyond that, then it's pretty kind of the same for like, I don't know, an hour and a half or something. Anyway, so I'm driving back from Oyen, and I'm sitting there in a little bit of a zombie mode. I'm just kind of staring out the window. Stay awake. Stay awake. And then all of a sudden my mind goes, why are two people riding horses across the road in front of me? And then I very quickly become more awake, and I go, oh, those aren't horses. As I slow down, those are moose. Yeah. So these two moose just walked across, and for those of you that aren't familiar, moose are so tall that if you hit them, you'll take their legs out and they'll land on your face. Whatever, they're like 2,000 pounds.
Yeah.
So walks across the highway and steps over the fence on the other side, both of them.
Wow.
Stepped over.
So, Jared, just for clarification, did they walk or did they saunter? Because
Yeah, they
moose
kind
are a sauntering bunch.
You're right. They did their goofy little kind of any weird goofy animal. It was a moose.
They've got really impressive, I'm going to say rack. They've got a nice rack. That
Right.
sounds awful, but it's like their horns is like,
Yeah. These were cows, so they didn't
Oh.
have any horn antlers, but yeah. Mhm.
wow.
But for sure, for a moose, that's as dangerous as a bear, maybe even more so.
Oh yeah, yeah. Especially for the males that do have like those huge antlers. Like they're not Bullwinkle.
Oh, and I agree. I understand you guys have to go, but maybe we could touch on this next time. The like energy that goes into growing a thing so that you can fight another thing so you can have a mate. Like
Right?
the expense of it.
Yeah. Totally. That's a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Mary Clark, for joining us. We will connect again, and we'll have a focus on what that conversation will look like, because I'm sure there's lots of other things you'd like to share. So on that note,
I'm Trent Akers.
and I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that this message has been as meaningful to you as it has been to us. If you're looking for help, you can find us on Facebook at Humanizing Mental Health.